Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 18th of December. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information all year long. You can do that freely by calling us at 1-800-472-0391. That, of course, is your Alaska Weather Information line. We encourage you to write that number down and use it. When you call, you'll get a series of numbers that you can choose from. Go ahead and write those down as you're going, and it'll make the next call go even faster there. Those numbers are specific to your part of Alaska or wherever you're headed. Weather.gov/Alaska is your online resource to all of our weather service information for you. It also has links to the maps that you'll see here on the show for the rest of tonight. Those usually get updated in the afternoon hours before the show, and you can watch and take a look at those all the way through the evening and early morning hours. Some of those start to go away as we get into the morning, as we update more of the official products and pictures from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, the River Forecast Center, and even the National Weather Service pictures that we have for wind and waves across the region. Now, as you have questions, you can't find what you're looking for, I'm happy to serve you any way I possibly can. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is how you find me online, and I'll answer my emails as quickly as possible. Here's a look at the hazardous weather across Alaska. Really not a whole lot super severe going on across the region right now. It is cold, it is dark, it is icy and snowy in some cases. But as far as big wind, poor visibility, big snow, big cold, there's not a whole lot to talk about. So that's good. It's kind of a normal winter maybe for the moment. Yeah, I don't know. Across northern parts of the southeast, there is something though. Until about 6 o'clock tonight, and this should be ending likely as you're watching our show tonight, very soon we are looking at heavy snow winding down, at least for this round. Last night had another round of snow move through. Some folks picked up another 6 to 8 inches around the Haines area, all the way up the Lynn Canal. Tonight, another round of winter weather is still working its way out of the Haines area. It could have a total of about 6 to 10 inches of snow in some cases. And there could be more on the way later this week. This is kind of where we are. We've got low pressure just kind of hovering right in here. And when the winds line up and cold air sitting just right over Haines and a trough of low pressure is passing by, it's perfect for a nice little dump of snow right there on top of Haines. So be prepared for more snow throughout the rest of the week, but right now no other warnings, watches, or advisories posted except for this one that will be ending this evening. So the current round of snow should be winding down. How's that? Low pressure sitting across the western Gulf is pretty easy to pick out. You just look for this big pinwheel right there. And out ahead of that, a lot of unstable air. All these clouds here tell us that there is a bubbling of the atmosphere coming up toward us in the screen, off and away the surface of the Earth. And that is moving towards southeast. So each one of these clouds could produce a quick little burst of rain or snow, or maybe a little bit of a mixture. It's going to be a better chance of a mix south of Juneau along the outer coast, and especially to southern southeast, where it'll be a little bit better chance of rain. But everything we see here across the interior is just cold air. It's a satellite going, usually I'm looking for cold. That's where the clouds get drawn in. In this case, it doesn't work so well in the winter. We've talked about that many times, but that's what you're seeing here across the interior is a lot of cold air. Temps today and the next several days across the upper Yukon Valley, Fort Yukon, Yukon Flats, probably looking about 35, maybe 40 below in some cases. There's some indications that some of the weather across the upper parts of the flats there could be looking at 50 below, but you're going to be pushing the envelope for some serious cold there. So watch for that, but let's expect temperatures at least 20 to about 35 below at their coldest. Some of that cold is also spreading westward. We have a new weather system coming in across the western Bering, a front right about here, and as that approaches, it's going to have to push that cold out of the way. So we're going to see this cold sticking around, but we're also going to see it on the move, it looks like, because of that next weather system coming in. So it'll be interesting there. We also have a lot of cold here across the North Slope. Not as much wind, though. There's still some blowing snow around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, but the good news is that compared to what it looked like at least a couple days ago, the wind seems to be settling down in those areas. But we are going to focus on more wind around the Copper River Delta, probably areas around southeast and the gaps and the passes here, especially northern parts of southeast, and around the Knik Valley up toward the Matanuska Valley. There may be a little bit of an additional gust in the weather here coming up here as that cold air in the interior is trying to find a place to go. Low pressure across the West Gulf right now, or western Gulf of Alaska, 967 millibars. So it's got some pockets of rain along that. Out across southeast, some areas of wet weather there and a little bit of snow still falling around the Haines region. Up north, some reports of blowing snow around the upper Yukon Valley. Also across the Chukchi coast, some light snow there. But really the big weather picture is going to focus around low pressure here across the eastern Gulf as we go into tonight. This is drawing in a lot of wet weather across southeast and kind of brushing the outer coast, occasionally with some rain and snow around Prince William Sound, light snow showers around Kodiak and also around the Alaska Peninsula all the way out toward the eastern Aleutians. This pattern right here is a ridge of high pressures coming in from the North Pacific, all pushing in some stronger winds from the west and southwest ahead of the next weather front that's coming into the western Bering. That low is still across eastern Asia, so it's got a while to go before it reaches into western Alaska, which means low pressure is in charge, and that cold high pressure system right now that's made its way into the Yukon Valley is going to stay put, keeping skies generally clear across the central and western interior and parts of southwest. As we get into Thursday, you can see the center of high pressure. That means big cold this time of the year for the interior. Those pressure levels are only around 1,022 millibars, so it's not the biggest, deepest, baddest cold high pressure system ever, but it's going to move very, very slowly and be pretty decent cold there for this time of the year. Around Fort Yukon, again, anywhere from about 30 to 35 below, maybe. That's kind of a conservative estimate. Out across the west, generally clear conditions and still pretty cold, 10 to 20 below in some cases there. Good news is there won't be a lot of wind, so the wind chill won't be a factor in that, even though it will still be cold. Out across the west, the front makes its way through the central Aleutians. That ridge of high pressure is starting to creep eastward a little bit. May still have some snow showers around the Alaska Peninsula and the chain. Low pressure in the Gulf really hasn't moved much at this point. This front's trying to die as much as it can. Rain showers on the inside, maybe some high terrain snow showers close by, and then generally from Juneau northward, a mixture of rain and snow up toward Haines, much better chance of snow. And then windy conditions around the Copper River Delta, around Tanita Pass, Broad Pass, likely the Matanuska Valley there, all looking at some pretty gusty conditions there as all of this very dense air wants to drain out into the vacuum that's sitting out across the Gulf. As we get into Friday, the weather system in the Gulf is filling in a little bit. Pressure levels are coming up. The wind should be going down in some cases, but notice the pressure boundary here is really starting to tighten up across southeast. So the winds may be coming up and across the Lynn Canal. And Juneau, we'll be watching for that. Snow across some of the higher terrain around Yakutat, Icy Cape, Cape Fairweather, blowing snow across some of our passes in the eastern and southern interior. High pressure still in charge around Fort Yukon, so cold, ice fog, still looks like that'll be a lock. And then you'll start to see wind developing here around Kotzebue Sound on the Chukchi coast, maybe even the Seward Peninsula in the west and the Bering Strait as this front is working its way eastward, squeezing that cold air that doesn't want to move. And so what happens is the pressure gradient tightens up and the wind starts to move pretty quickly. High pressure also sneaks in out of the North Pacific, 1,021 millibars. Remember, that was a ridge that was kind of poking up here. It's kind of getting flattened out, and there's another weather system coming in behind it for the weekend. We'll be watching for areas of low pressure to come in, probably across the Aleutians. That might bring up the gales a little bit across the region, maybe some stronger winds there as well. Overnight lows in southeast, looks like most places stay at or at least above freezing. Lower 30s around Cordova and Valdez, 20s for the Kenai Peninsula, 36 in Kodiak. Fairbanks, you're looking at air quality alerts again and temps anywhere from 10 to 25, maybe even 30 below. Pushing 40 below in Fort Yukon, 9 below in Utqiagvik, 7 below for Kaktovik. Kotzebue Sound temps 5 to 10 below, 1 below in Nome Southwest, anywhere from 9 to 20 below there from the Yukon Delta and the Kuskokwim Delta, Bethel to Grayling, let's say. And anywhere from about 0 to 10 above as you head up toward Lake Iliamna. The Alaska Peninsula, the Pribilovs, all in the 20s and 30s. A little bit warmer for the afternoon tomorrow. 25 to about 40 below for the interior tomorrow. South Central, south of the Alaska Range, you're looking at teens and 20s, 30 in Homer. Southeast, 30s and 40s. Sitka may make 42 degrees. Bethel, you're looking at 1 below. Nome, about 0. Gamble, 26. Overnight lows Friday morning, anywhere from 30 to maybe 45 below across the Yukon Flats. 38 below around Fairbanks, 20s and teens and 20s below 0 across the North Slope, 27 in Kodiak, and 30s for southeast with high temperatures on Friday. Not a whole lot warmer in the interior and looking at teens in South Central.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your aviation weather. IFR conditions will set in across the west. This is all ahead of the next low pressure system that's working its way east into the Bering Sea, but predominant situation will be controlled by low pressure still lurking in the Gulf. That'll keep slop moving into southeast, especially northern parts of southeast with IFR concerns there. Marginal concerns around Prince William Sound and the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula into the Copper River Valley and northward into the upper Tanana and maybe just hinting into the upper Yukon Valley. The north slope still looking at wind driving in some low visibility at times, and then along the west coast with those northerly winds coming in. As we get into the afternoon, you can see IFR advancing eastward still into the western Bering, maybe making it to Adak and starting to encroach on St. Paul and St. George, certainly St. Matthew and the western end of St. Lawrence Island by the evening hours. Hit and miss IFR across southeast, especially the higher terrain around Ketchikan, Annette, and Hyder northward to very close to Petersburg, northern parts of the Gulf, and all the way down toward Northway and perhaps closing in on McCarthy, especially the higher terrain on the other side of the hill. As we get into Friday morning again, that low pressure system's creeping east. Most of the interior, most of southwest, Kodiak Island, south central, all looking at VFR, but it is going to be cold. And then marginal conditions across the north and eastern Gulf. Areas across southern southeast see significant improvement there from IFR flipping back over to VFR, but marginal concerns continue around Stevens Passage up to the Lynn Canal and the outer coast for the most part, north to south. You'll see marginal conditions linger there through the afternoon. A little bit of improvement around the Lynn Canal north of the capital city to Haines, Skagway, and Gustavus. Southwest, south central, and most of the interior west looking at VFR conditions, but IFR starts to push into Cape Newenham, sneaks up into Bethel perhaps by the end of the day, all the way down toward Port Hayden, Pilot Point, Sandpoint, and west, south of Unalaska, Nikolsky, and to the west, hit and miss marginal conditions there. Most of south central, Prince William Sound, and Kodiak look to be VFR through the day. Thursday in Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass. Right now we're calling VFR conditions, but just to the east of Adigan, it looks like marginal concerns may start to work in there so that for right now, unless that sneaks west, we're not going to have any significant concerns around the Brooks Range passes at this point. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look to be VFR throughout your day. Rainy Pass should be VFR. Now, as you get eastward, you're going to find a little bit of marginal concerns there. Windy Pass might be one of those by Thursday afternoon. Isabel Pass looks to be even more likely MVFR throughout your day. And then Mentasta Pass could lean all the way over toward IFR as we get into Thursday and last really for most of the day, though. There may be some improvements in the afternoon, so watch for that if you need to get through. But right now it looks to be mostly IFR. Tanita Pass, probably marginal conditions most of your Thursday. Porter's Pass, easily marginal on the Prince William Sound side. And Chilkoot and White Pass start out with IFR and look for improvements to occur during the afternoon. Should be even better again as we head into Friday. As we look at Thursday morning, the surface freezing line still holding north out toward eastern Russia. The central and western parts of the chain start to see that elevated warming moving in too to as much as 4,000 feet, maybe 6,000 feet if it gets an extra southerly boost. Most of the central and eastern Gulf holding around 2,000 feet from about Gustavus all the way down toward Ketchikan and Annette, the surface freezing line just to the north. And you can see that holding over the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, and then taking a jog over the Alaska Peninsula around Sandpoint. Icing potential certainly there. You'll have to go above 3,000 feet out in the west, especially for Adak there. It looks like areas around St. Paul and St. George also getting in on some of that additional moisture and cold air. Out in the east, though, it's a little different story. The levels don't look a whole lot different, 2, 3, even 4,000 feet there and above. But what we have across the eastern interior and really parts of the interior areas of Prince William Sound is significant cold. And so it's not that the moisture isn't there, it's just that the temperatures are too cold, in fact, for icing potential to be that great. So getting up above this actually gets you into slightly warmer air where icing potential increases. The jet stream right now has a broad trough sitting out across the west. Wind speeds there, powerful into the Pacific jet, 100 to about 120 knots or so. And then a deep dive from the north coming into the Gulf of Alaska, 100 to 150 knots on the south side of this, powering a lot of this cold and Pacific storm energy into the Pacific Northwest. But it's also dragging in deep cold. And so for a short period of time, there is going to be a big chill across the west and across the interior and at times across south central and southeast. Thursday, you can see northerlies in control of the interior, anywhere from 20 to 30 knots, sustained 45 knots out across the northwestern Gulf, and then southeasterlies controlling southeastern Alaska, westerlies coming in across the Bering. As we get to 3,000 feet, low pressure doesn't move here. The northerly winds continue, 15 to as much as 40 knots over Bristol Bay, south and easterly winds across Prince William Sound, and then there's our westerly flow coming in across the Bering again. Turbulence, widespread, considerable moderate across the Yukon Valley, southwest, the Aleutians, parts of south central Prince William Sound, and southeastern Alaska.
On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. "80 miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves, known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand, and by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the US during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists used this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska. And back with your marine weather now. Here's a quick sea ice update. We know the cold air has been working its way across the interior, and as it continues west, flowing into low pressure here across the western Bering, it is growing ice away from the coast and filling in some of the nooks and crannies that we've seen here around Kotzebue and Norton Sound, and also growing ice here across the southwestern coast. One thing it's also doing is pulling away some of the older ice of the season away from the coast, and you can see one of those breaks here right along the Yukon Delta and outside of Norton Sound. We'll probably see a few more of those across some of the newer ice because really this isn't terribly thick just yet. We're also filling in some of the gaps there around the Bering Strait, so that's great news. Watch for more growth, but also as the winds come up and shift around a little bit, that'll likely change that leading edge of ice. In the blue, that's the marginal ice zone closer to Nunivak Island and just north of St. Lawrence Island, where there's still very little ice at this point on this December 18th. For the very latest ice information, head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On to your marine weather now in southeast. A broad south and easterly flow is flowing into low pressure out here in the Gulf of Alaska, but we still have light northerly winds coming down through the Lynn Canal. Light winds here means 2-foot seas there across the northern canal. Now inside and further south, you're still getting 20 to 25 from the southeast, 4 to 8-foot seas there on the outer coast, anywhere from 15 to as much as 18-footers out across the outer coast at 25 knots. That's Thursday. Friday, we'll probably see winds come down just a little bit there as they diminish. They're looking to turn a little bit more out of the east, blowing offshore from Yakutat to Cross Sound and Gustavus, still holding a south and southeasterly flow all the way down from Port Alexander to the Dixon entrance. Light southeasterlies inside of Clarence Strait, stronger northerly winds starting to develop across the Lynn Canal there, and that may be a result of that stronger area of high pressure here across the continent, looking to flow out and into low pressure that's approaching with a front coming into the outer coast on Friday. For South Central, not as much wind for Prince William Sound. Northeasterlies 15 with a 2-foot sea there, 4-foot seas in the Gulf, or in the northern parts of Cook Inlet, I should say. Stronger winds from the north and west coming across the Barrens and gusts to 45 there. Again, a result of that low pressure system parked right here in the Gulf. North and easterlies light across the northern Gulf right now with an 8 to about 11-foot sea. As we get into Friday, it shifts just a little bit more and it starts to pick up. We're going to start to see a change in those wind gusts and the pattern there across the Barrens, probably looking at some stronger gusts around the Copper River Delta and maybe some of the nooks and crannies there in our favorite passes in Prince William Sound. So watch for that. Northerlies at 20 knots with 4-foot seas, 9 to 11-foot seas around the Barrens and 6-foot seas in northern Cook Inlet. For southwest, Bristol Bay, you're looking at northerly winds, 20 knots, 7-foot seas. Northwesterlies cutting across the Alaska Peninsula at 30 knots, 11 to 12-foot seas on either side. Kodiak Island, gusts to 50 coming across Shelikof Strait again, so watch for that. and it looks like we'll probably be looking at about 5 to 8 foot seas, not 50-foot seas. So mind that just a little bit as we get into Friday. Westerlies cutting across Shelikof Strait, 25 knots, looking for northwesterlies coming across the Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from 7 to 12 foot seas. They're 9 to 10 foot seas on either side of Kodiak Island. And again, that northwesterly flow will be in charge. Out across the west, southward westerlies from Adak all the way out towards Shemya, 35 knots on a 18 to 20 foot sea. Look for west and northwesterlies on either side of the ridge here as that's pushing eastward through the central and eastern chain, 25 to 30 knots, anywhere from 11 to 12 foot seas on Thursday. You can see that's kind of holding the same pattern for Friday a little bit. Winds becoming west and northwesterly with time as that ridge is creeping eastward, and west and southwesterly winds pick up out around Kiska and Attu at 13 to 16 foot seas there. 20 to 25 knots are expected. For the west coast, northerly winds from Macoriac southward. You get into a southerly flow for St. Matthew and a northwesterly flow around St. Paul and St. George. What's going on? Why is this so weird? No, that ridge of high pressure is right here. So winds are cutting in. We've got the cold dropping southward and the new weather pattern coming in from the west and south. Southeasterlies around St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots and 5 foot seas there. We have ice in Norton Sound and across some of our southwestern capes, so that helps. Southwesterlies, though, still working in over the open water for the Kuskokwim Delta, 25 knots and 10 foot seas on Friday. A west and southwesterly wind is building in with that new weather system, 30 knots there with 11 to 19 foot seas. Easterlies over the ice for Norton Sound and southeasterlies for St. Lawrence Island. Again, still part of that colder outflow pattern that's coming across the continent. Up north, northerlies for the Beaufort on Thursday, an offshore flow for the Chukchi, 10 to 25 all over the ice. Not a big change there for Friday. Winds start to turn a little bit northwesterly for Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik. Easterlies for the Chukchi coast at 25. Again, all over the ice. Recapping tonight's weather around Haines and the Northern Lynn Canal. Snow is possible, and it looks like the heaviest of which will start to wind down this evening, so the winter storm warning will be rescinded, but more snow could be in your future this week. Low pressure systems sitting in the Gulf will crank up the wind for many of the gaps and passes around south central, southeast, and the eastern interior, and a new weather system's creeping in from the west. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.